why should a young person get familiarized with the work of Carl Gustav Jung?
That's a wonderful question, and we can talk about this for a very long time and forever. Carl Gustav Jung is a Swiss psychiatrist that just passed away in 1960. He is the father of analytical psychology. And he was a student of Freud, and both of them, they form the basis of what psychology is today, and a lot of what clinical psychology is today. Especially Freud, it's all about clinical psychology. Carl Jung also a lot about clinical psychology, but what Carl Jung brought that others did not, that wasn't there yet, is the self, the fullness of who we are, the self, which we talked about it before. And the self is a big, huge concept. It's who we are at the core, with everything that we are, with our spiritual, physical, mental, emotional shadows, are our things that are not so good, all of the mistakes that we do, all of the good things that we do, all of that is complex mechanism. But since Carl Jung, there were so many others that expanded in their area. Carl Jung, it's a lot of work. He presented a lot. It's a lot to digest, because it's a lot to digest. So what followed after, there were a clarification of some of Carl Jung aspects of what he thought in the language to which he presented at the time. Today's is, you cannot use the same language, because it's just language changes and it's evolved, and certain terms, the way we use certain terminology, it's not the same, doesn't have the same meaning as he had back then. So after that, different areas, different branches of psychology started expanding. Yeah, that's I've covered that in my Feelfulness book. But Carl Jung still continues to be the one that has a full circle about the human existence. Now, let me go back a little bit. Before Carl Jung, we had William James, 1800s. He's the father of functional psychology. William James, the father of functional psychology, began to teach us about different aspects of the self. You have the material self, the spiritual self, the other senses of self. Now, Carl Jung expanded that explosively, right? Only by beginning to understand that there are different aspects of the self, it gives us an understanding of the material self, that which we are incarnate in the human body, and all of our material possessions are just a part of who we are. Back then, many years ago, the spiritual self, oh, this is really, really old. Before religion, before civilization, during tribal time, during shamanic time, the spiritual self was one of the most important aspects of who the person is. With civilization, that started to kind of dilute, kind of diminish a lot. So William James, that I'm familiar with, brought that back into psychology. Some people that follow after didn't like it, so took William James out of the psychology literature. William James, 1800s again, encouraged us that when we do therapy, to include the God and the goddesses and the Holy Spirit as we understand it today. Any upper, any helper, any spiritual helper that has a meaning to the client, bring them in, have therapy to that. It adds to the healing. But then people after him, even one of his students, if I remember correctly, figured, no, that's not elegant, that's not intellectual, that's a lot of unintellectual. And psychologists started to deviate from including the spiritual aspect of the self. Well, Carl Jung went back to it and said, no, you're not going to be complete without the spiritual. And the spiritual that there is actually much more complex. There is an anima animus, and there is even an anima mundi that is a spiritual to the world, to the planet. Everything has a spirit. Animal have a spirit, the plant have a spirit. The consciousness is much more evolved, and up until you start to include the spiritual self, you're not going to be complete.
That's where the archetypes come into place, correct? That's how he developed the concept of archetypes, the collective unconscious, and that's how we learn about. Uh,
Yes. And that's a good question. And let me be right back with that question because it's a wonderful question. All right, stay tuned.